Could you have a opening prayer for us, sir?
Be happy to. Let's pray, y'all. Dear Lord, we're grateful for this day that you've blessed us with. Dear Lord, in this time we have to get together with respect to planning the future for our county. Dear Lord, we ask a special blessing on the Berkeley group and our county staff that's guiding us through this process. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
I call the Board of Supervisors meeting to order for this special meeting. All in favor? Aye, Scary.
Are you gonna call the
I
members?
can.
Go ahead and call us.
We'll call the Planning Commission meeting in order for tonight, for tonight's joint work session. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carried.
You gonna call the roll?
Call the roll. Treva doesn't have a,
Just,
Mr. Allen.
you see who's here.
yeah. Mr. Allen. Yeah. Mr. Allen. Yeah. Mr. Robinson. Here. Mr. Kane. Aye. Here. Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Ms. Barnes Rhodes. Here. Ms. Odom. Here. Ms. Wiley. Here. And everybody else is absent.
That's it, other than Mr. Antone.
Yes, yeah, all the board members are here.
Everybody except Mr. Antone.
Yeah, everybody but Joe.
Okay. All right, we will turn it over to the Berkeley group.
Thank you so much. For the record, my name is Kelly Davis. I'm the planning director with the Berkeley Group, and I'm joined today by Aaron Berryhill, who is also a planner with the Berkeley Group. And tonight we're going to be tag teaming the presentation. We are so happy to be before you again as we move into the final chapters of this comprehensive plan development. We're here before you tonight to present the transportation and the land use and implementation chapters. Good to see everyone here. We've got a full house tonight, which is great. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to review the current progress on your plan. We'll talk about the policy chapter review, that's your transportation and mobility chapter, as well as your implementation and next steps. And I do apologize, they don't have the presentations in front of them today. So just take your chairs and orient toward the back of the room. We'll have, we don't always provide the presentation in advance, and we're sorry that we didn't do that today. Remember for next time. So, starting with the project scope, this is again just a brief overview of where we are at with the plan. The check marks indicate the areas that we've already completed, with your help, of course. We've reviewed your existing plans, we've conducted those workshops and surveys, we've worked through the vision and goal statements, and tonight we're in that final review of those draft chapters, and then moving on to the implementation strategies as well. Along with that, the next step would then be public review and refinement after we incorporate any final comments, and then moving on after that to public hearing and adoption. As a reminder, we always like to revisit that community vision statement that we worked through at the beginning of the plan. So this tends to guide what we think about as we work through each of these chapters. So as a forward-thinking community with strong family values, Greensville County will support job creation, education, and high quality of life that strengthens our economy and encourages strategic growth while becoming a closer bound community sensitive to the needs of all our citizens. So moving on now to transportation and mobility, I'm actually going to ask Aaron to join me at the dais, and I'm going to turn it over to him to take you through the transportation and mobility chapter and those changes to the transportation map that we talked through after the last work session.
Hello, glad to be back, and hopefully the transportation chapter shouldn't be too foreign. I think we talked about some of these items in the last meeting, so some of this is just kind of reflecting of some of those changes and discussion points from the last meeting. Just as a reminder, the goal for this chapter, for the transportation and mobility chapter, was to fully utilize and maintain current road and rail networks while expanding public transportation opportunities and upgrading pedestrian infrastructure to ensure safe and efficient movement of goods, services, and citizens throughout Greensville County and beyond. And certainly when I was researching this chapter, I feel like it was very appropriate. Those kind of 3 items, or really 4, the road, rail, pedestrian, and public transportation. Those were really clear assets that the county has and should continue to really capitalize on. So just kind of looking at sort of the existing conditions within the county as it pertains to transportation that really stood out. And I think you'll kind of see that on the attachment 1 on that second page, the profile sheet. There's a lot of really kind of exciting things about both the location of Greensville County and also the transportation infrastructure within the county that makes it a really unique place for transportation for a number of different reasons and for a number of different modes of travel. One just being the location and access to highways. The county is really kind of centrally located between 3 pretty large urban areas with a lot of travel going on between those urban areas, and therefore a lot of travel going on through Greensville County. 2 of those being corridors of statewide significance, which are denoted by VDOT, which is Highway 58, and then I-95, which would certainly, we could argue, is probably a country corridor of significance, one of the most traveled corridors in the entire country. So certainly a really important asset and part of the community. Some of the other things that really stood out, the public transit system, it is quite new, but there has been ridership growth. That was something that when I was looking at some of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation information from the state, they really pointed out that the Greensville and Emporia transit system was one of the few in the recent years that's seen ridership growth compared to other systems in the state. So that's really unique and really interesting and exciting. The county has been seeing and continues to see an expanding pedestrian infrastructure and sidewalks. There continues to be access to major railroads for freight, and then there also is an airport within the county with a lot of capacity for growth. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on with transportation that leads us kind of into those strategies that we developed.
Isn't Route 301 statewide corridor significance?
It is, that's a good question. It is a part essentially of the I-95
Correct.
because it parallels it.
Okay.
So, and I forget the exact name of it. I think it's the Washington to North Carolina corridor. And because those routes parallel each other, they're kind of considered part of that
Gotcha.
same corridor.
Okay. I know when we applied for projects in the past, it was in V-Trans as a significant corridor.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Just having those corridors really is advantageous for VDOT funding. Any projects directly accessing either of those major corridors really sets kind of projects ahead in terms of VDOT standing. So this next slide, which we kind of saw this in the last meeting, and I believe that's going to be on, it should be on page number, excuse me, 14 on the first attachment. And so most of these are reflective of what we had up in the last meeting. We did kind of change a couple of things. Number 9, we changed that. That was kind of a discussion that I think most people agreed on, really focusing on if there would be sort of any interchange improvements as a part of developing a new interchange would be really focusing on improvements in skippers. And then there's a couple of others that we added after discussing with Lynn on some of their specific projects that they've been working on. That includes number 6, the extension of Liberty Road. So that one was added. And then there's a number of additional routes that we included on the number 5 with just some paving and alignment. So these, again, are for the most part pretty reflective of what we discussed last time, and a lot of them come out of various different sources. Some of them a little bit dated. The Crater PDC Rural Transportation Plan, I believe, is from 2014. So we've tried to include just the ones that are still relevant. I know also number 3, we changed that to the west side of US 301. I think there was just a little bit of confusion. I think we had it as the east side last time. So really just refined a couple of things. And that's about it. If anyone has any kind of remaining questions, or comments on any of these. And then the map on the next page corresponds to this table, so those numbers are going to correspond to the ID numbers within the table, just so you can kind of locate where projects might be.
Yeah, 'cause number 8, it just says bridge on Fountain Creek, and there's a bunch of bridges, but after you said that, it's on Moore's Ferry, the one that's going to Tree.
Correct.
Correct.
Because you turn right at that bridge to get on there, and tractor trailers and all coming across from that quarry, it's dangerous.
Yeah, and that's one of the ones that we added just based off of your input at the last meeting.
Yeah, I think maybe on that, to better nail down the location, put the bridge at Route 629 in it.
629.
Yeah, Route 629, maybe just add Route.
We've got that on, well, there is a location.
Got it at the right place.
We have a column on there that has the route numbers. We can move that farther to the left. It's just kind of hidden there in the middle.
Moore's Ferry.
Yeah. Yeah.
What number?
Yeah, so we'll add that, and we can also make those route numbers a little bit more visible.
It's probably one of the oldest bridges on Fountain Creek, isn't it,
Well, he talks about the bridges in another section.
Yeah, there is there is quite an extensive discussion in the chapter on bridges. I don't believe that one was one of the ones that's rated as poor by VDOT. There are 2 poor bridges. That's on page 9 of attachment 1. Most of the bridges in the county are in fair condition, as well as all the culverts. The yellow being the bridges in that graph, the green being the culverts.
VDOT, just so y'all know, VDOT rates all the bridges in the state of Virginia. They have ratings for them, and that's one reason they just redid the bridge at Country Club Road that goes over railroad track 301, because it was one of the lowest rated in the state. So
But
all these projects listed don't mean we will be taking it head on. A lot of these VDOT will be taken head on. But, we want to identify it in our comp plan in case we do apply. Just like Liberty Road, we get extra points because it's in the comp plan, so we want to make sure we can include everything in there that we know needs to be done, so the score better when we do apply.
Yeah, and that's a good point. These are really just essentially what you could kind of consider as priorities. And Morse Ferry Road, the bridge over I-95, is considered poor rating. I'm not sure exactly what the one over Fountain Creek would be. Given your description, it's probably at least in the fair range. But, I mean, these kind of ratings will play into how VDOT determines funding and priority for these projects. And again, this is just the map that corresponds to that table. And then as far as the strategies that we've kind of developed coming out of the chapter itself, and that's going to be on page 16. There's kind of different themes. The first 10 are really kind of focused on maintaining, improving, and really just developing the road infrastructure that's here and improving it. So there's a number of different things. Really kind of the first couple are really focused on continuing to coordinate with VDOT, making sure that you have all this information in your comp plan and that it's clear that the priorities of the county is in sync with the priorities of VDOT, given that they're just necessarily interrelated. Another one, which is number 3, is a possibility, it's called an urban development area, which is a VDOT terminology as a type of designation that's basically an area that's being kind of promoted for more intense development, and that could be considered exit 4 at Skippers or another area. And so really highlighting that area, if the county chooses to do so, then it kind of increases the competitiveness of that area for funding, just kind of noting that area for VDOT as kind of a specific place where there will likely be necessary transportation improvements, and officially kind of going through that process of an urban development area designation kind of sets that process in motion to really prioritize an area. And so that kind of follows with one of those suggestions in that table, which was sort of improve the exit 4, but it could be somewhere else as well.
And then urban development areas in our land use plan, you know, we have a map with that area. So that's how you would tie it to this chapter.
And then some of the other suggestions, I think the signage and wayfinding, just given the amount of traffic that passes through Greensville County, and a lot of them are just passing through, finding ways to coordinate with the city and the towns to attract people off of the highway to visit the businesses within the county, and just kind of developing a signage and wayfinding to get people into different parts of the county who are traveling. Additionally, kind of following with that, one of our other kind of suggestions was streetscaping and developing sort of entrance corridors into the county, where you're kind of entering the county on these major corridors, sort of kind of a sense of arrival into the county is sort of kind of another suggestion, as well as kind of maintaining the roads and the vegetation along some of these highly traveled areas. A couple of the others that we've included are kind of more so in kind of that complement the land use component of it, one being the access management, and starting to think a little bit about, in developing areas, limiting the number of driveways within a certain area if you're developing on US 301, kind of limiting and thinking about safety and just sort of developing land, and so that it's kind of complementary to your transportation system, and really developing kind of those supportive land use strategies that are in coordination with your transportation infrastructure.
Do you think it would be beneficial to add VDOT's limited access areas to the comp plan?
That's probably a good point. I would agree, yes. I can't think of offhand, but I know that there are a number of sections along US 301 where they would,
58 also.
yeah, where they would just simply not approve additional driveways on those areas just due to concerns about traffic flow.
Yeah.
I don't agree with item number 8 on that page 16 myself. Require property owners to remove trees.
So
That doesn't seem right.
I have a question in reference to being that you own the trees. I don't know if VDOT have anything to do with it, but around exit 4, is there any plans to cut those trees around those business area? Or
He wouldn't know that. We'd have to talk to VDOT,
VDOT, okay,
VDOT about that.
okay.
So just to clarify on number 8, I think it's rather specific in terms of the code in Virginia about dangerous roadside vegetation. It's very specific in terms of if there is a vegetation that's clearly blocking the sight line and sort of impeding the right of way, only to that extent, not just because there are trees along the road.
That should be VDOT's responsibility, not the landlord.
I think what he's talking about, and the city has one that's similar to this, where you have your lot, and then you have a sidewalk, and you get that little strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street in front of your house. The city makes you cut that even though you don't own it. They have an ordinance like that. So I think you're only referring to where you'd have a residential house and your yard goes to the street, making sure they don't let any vegetation grow up that would block any sighting distances or anything.
I would think probably more likely on a corner and probably a more residential area where you've got like a large shrub that just hasn't been trimmed, and so you really don't have a good view of if you're trying to turn left or right and you can't see oncoming traffic. That's kind of the idea. So in some cases it may include a tree, but I would think that's kind of the more common, is just on a corner where there's traffic turning in and out and you simply can't see. And so if that shrub is on private property, but it's blocking the view, basically what you would call a sight triangle. So if you're at the intersection, you're looking left and right, and you don't have a full sight line because there's just sort of an overgrown
We've had
shrub.
these issues, and probably everybody in here knows it. When you go to Allen Road and you turn left on 608 like you go into Boar's Head, we had issues with that lady on the corner and her cedar trees. I know Tony probably remembers it, but
Had issues, yeah, and on Allen Road and White Plain too.
yeah, it Ray property, yeah.
Way back when.
Let me help you out on that right there. This is VDOT road.
Yeah.
You have what you call the easement.
Mhm.
And if you're just going down a highway, I just dealt with this with VDOT. So what they'll do is they say as long as it stays on the easement that they can use, and they got to cut the limbs, and they only go up 20 feet high. Because our concern was school buses, when you
Yeah.
leave Wide High School, and those trees, the way they are hanging down, there's a possibility they could hit the bus.
Yes,
But they told us what they could do. They can come in, but no, they're not gonna go up no higher than 20 feet.
yeah,
And they can't cut beyond what the easement said. Anything beyond the easement, they're not gonna cut, and they only go 20 feet up in the air. That's how high they're gonna go.
and I think what he's talking about, I'm gonna use Mr. Pearson, I know you live on the corner lot, correct, right at Sadler and 58. If he had a holly bush or something on his land on that corner lot, he never took care of it, and then the people trying to turn on 58 couldn't see oncoming traffic, that's what this is intended for.
No, what I was doing,
You're talking about the tree,
agreeing with you.
yeah.
I was just giving you what VDOT said
Yeah,
what they
yeah.
would do.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying if it's my
Yeah.
property, but I would just, to further explain what y'all was talking about, what VDOT said that they would
Yeah.
do if they had to come out and trim under the condition that they would come out and trim.
And we have to get them cut trees
Yeah.
from time to time, I call them,
Yeah.
you know, when we have cases like that.
So I think my sense on this discussion, and this strategy is not meant to be kind of a gotcha thing like, oh, we just don't like this tree, you need to get rid of it. So maybe remove may not be the best verb.
Maintain.
Maintain is kind of what I was thinking, or something a little bit not as aggressive as just simply remove. It's really a safety is what we are going after, not at all just kind of a gotcha to private property owners to remove vegetation on their property for really no good reason. It's really, if it's a safety concern, then you should maintain the vegetation.
Yeah, and you could just simply add the language to outside of the right-of-way. That would
That's a good
kinda
point.
clear that up.
Yes.
Was there any other comments on really the first 10 strategies? And those mostly are kind of related to the road infrastructure. So some of the other kind of key strategies on the next page, these are kind of looking at some of your other forms of transportation. 14 and 15 are just kind of thinking about the airport and thinking about ways to kind of maximize that facility. I know there's been a few improvements made to the airport hangar there to kind of improve they maximize the funding. And so kind of, just kind of continuing to commit to the maintenance and improvement of the airport. And then following that, just really being adaptive about how to grow and expand aviation-related businesses that would use the airport, as well as other businesses that may benefit from having an airport, just to be able to maybe fly in and out executives and that type of thing. So just really kind of continuing to maximize the opportunity that the airport provides. Then the next set of strategies, 16 through 18, is thinking about the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure that the county does have and should continue to develop. So there's kind of a few. I know one of them, number 17, would be promoting the safe routes to schools. That's something that's already kind of been in the works in terms of building sidewalks to the middle school and the elementary school. There's kind of an idea of expanding that a little bit larger, perhaps within a 1 mile or 2 mile radius to try to promote walking to school or just kind of safety. That's kind of a common recommendation. And then also really focusing on where there is new development, both residential and commercial. Just think about kind of activity centers. Perhaps recommending where there is large-scale development or commercial areas, just requiring sidewalks in those areas. And then also sort of improving some of the sidewalk infrastructure that is there. On number 16, making sure it's ADA compliant with ramps, and just thinking about some of those things as well. And then the last set of strategies, 19 through 22, are some of your kind of other transportation alternatives. 19 and 20 are kind of thinking about public transit, and sort of other ways of getting around the county without necessarily having your own private vehicle. So that could include carpooling, ride sharing like Uber, but also really the public transit, given that there is a system already in place. Another kind of one that was a suggestion, number 21, publish a system-wide bus route map online, just make it really accessible and really easy to use. The easier that you make a transportation system to use for the average resident, the easier it is. And we did develop kind of a draft map on page number 7 of what a system-wide map would look like, as opposed to just simply posting the schedule, but being able to visualize it and sort of integrating that is a kind of a strategy to really kind of promote the system and making it a little bit user. And so having something of kind of like this available both in print and online, just for residents to sort of access along with kind of the times, just to really promote the public transit within the county. And then also sort of thinking about how to expand the route where appropriate, where there's demand for it, just due to the concentration of development, residential and commercial areas. Right now, there's really only 2 stops within the actual county, one being here and then also in the Washington Park neighborhood. So just starting to think, I know it's a rather new system, but 5 years from now, where there might be demand for other stops within the county, and in addition to within the city. And then the last strategy that we had is thinking kind of a little bit towards the future, but of course this is already kind of happening, is promoting e-vehicle charging stations within the county. There is a lot of travel that comes through the county on the highways, and increasingly there's a lot of people that are thinking about needing to charge their vehicles, and it does take a little bit of time. So kind of promoting that infrastructure within the county gives people a reason to come to Greensville County and spend money here if there is that kind of infrastructure in place close to the highways, where there will be able to spend a couple of hours in the county if that infrastructure is readily accessible.
The only e-charging stations I know of in the shopping center at Walmart. Do y'all know of any others that might have been put in?
That's the only one I've seen.
Of course, that was in a mud puddle too.
I just know, for example, like a few weeks ago, I actually drove to Georgia on I-85, and somewhere in South Carolina, there's a gas station, and they've probably got 30 Tesla charging stations right off the highway. And I saw probably 10 cars there charging, and it's just a super charging station. And so kind of promoting that sort of infrastructure. It's already being built on major highways in the state and nationwide. And I would think, just given the kind of the hub of traffic that's coming through Greensville County, would be kind of a good opportunity to maximize on kind of the shifting types of modes of transportation and how to kind of capitalize on that and bring people into the county. Was there any other kind of comments on any of these strategies or any of the discussion or maps within the chapter itself?
Well, I just want to commend you on the statistics that you included in here. The statistics, the road classification maps, and the crash data. That really helps me when I'm applying for different funds, because I had to pull all that information, and you can save me time on my next application with this included in the comp plan.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we could help on that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Kelly, and we'll turn to the second attachment on the land use chapter.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, so for land use, similar to all of the other chapters, a while back we established the goal for land use as concentrating new business and residential development in and around urban centers and major transportation intersections, while allowing rural uses that promote the expansion of the agricultural economy and maintain the rural character and open space of Greensville County. And again, those were developed based off those surveys and initial public outreach that we had conducted. So really, one of the core uses of your comprehensive plan is this future land use chapter. So of all the chapters to get right and to read and to pay attention to, I would highly encourage you to take this home, spend a little time diving in. If anything seems out of place, or if you have a light bulb moment of something that you feel needs to be incorporated into this chapter, please let us know and send that over to Lynn to get over to us.
Can I tell them a few of the changes we made based on our conversation? If you look at the dry bread road area that's highlighted in yellow.
And this is on, he's jumping ahead, but it's
Oh,
on
I'm
the-
sorry,
this-
I'll wait.
That's okay. This map is on page 14 if you're looking, if you want to see the map that is on your screen, that's also on page 14 of your packet. Go ahead, Lynn.
So these areas are where we look for the next 20 years to probably extend public services. So a couple of these areas we pulled in because they had the low-density residential area all the way to the county line. And we've looked at that before, trying to get water and sewer to like Jones Mill Road, and it's just too cost prohibitive. So we pulled that back, and we did add one section. The staff here has been looking at our next water and sewer line extension and maybe CDBG project, and we think the Brickyard Road and James River Junction will be a good project, and it'll help us get water to 58 East. So I had them add that area, because I know we've been wanting to get water to 58 East for a long time, and if we can utilize CDBG funds to do it, that would be great. So I had them add that area. I think that's something in the next 20 years we're going to try to pursue.
Yes. So with that, that's everything you need to
I'm
know about
sorry.
land use.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead, I'm sorry.
But as Lynn mentioned, so we developed this land use map. It's really close to what your existing comprehensive plan land use map and categories are, with a few tweaks. And Lynn had looked at that original draft, and we've worked with him to refine that. So this is a staff refined future land use map, if you will. Some of the changes from your existing plan is the addition of these land use determinants. These are giving you some guidance of how these different areas were developed. So it's things like existing land use, access, resource protection areas, just so that if you're wondering why a particular area was designated low-density residential or commercial, you've got something to fall back on, or a little bit of education component in there as well. And then also, if staff is considering, or you as a planning commission and board have rezoning requests that come before you, there might be areas that are not currently designated on your comp plan, but that gives you some guidance to look at if you're trying to make these land use decisions or for a rezoning change. We also have identified what we're calling primary uses. These don't necessarily mean they are the only allowed uses. These uses are not going to align directly with your zoning ordinance. That's not the intent. It's just general, flexible guidance of what you would be looking at, including in each of these land use categories. If there's something that you feel like is missing, or anything that you feel like needs to be added or removed from those primary uses for any of those categories, I would highly suggest you take a look at that closely. In addition, another fairly new component for this plan is that we've added what I would consider some fairly light design principles into each land use classification. Some plans go very far and add very detailed design standards. As a predominantly rural community, we're adding some site design principles, some parking and access management and landscaping, open space principles, without taking it so far that it would become prohibitive to development or make it difficult. So we're looking for feedback. Most of those are going to be new in this plan. So any of those design principles, either that speak to you or that you feel like may need to be removed as not appropriate for your community. And those are on, make sure I point you to the page. That's on page 5 is where we start talking about that future land use discussion. So for your future land use areas, we've broken it down into your rural areas. That's your rural residential or conservation areas. That rural residential category is and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong in anything that I say, but the rural residential category is from your current plan. Some plans would just call that a rural area. So, think about even the naming of those areas. We've retained that rural residential name, but if it needs to, and it's kind of a mix of conservation and residential land use. Your rural hubs is an overlay that also is retained from your existing plan. They are shown on your land use map. Those are areas where we're looking at some concentration of potential commercial uses, very light, small-scale commercial uses, maybe a gas station. Just that would be an appropriate area for that. And then we've also shown the flood hazards overlay, as that does impact how you can use property in the rural areas. The next two categories fall under your residential areas. Those are your low-density residential and your medium-density residential. I would like, at the end of this, for us to just have a short discussion on density in those different residential classification areas. Then we move into what would be your active development areas. This includes commercial, industrial, and also your mining and extraction establishments. Lynn had went ahead and suggested we go ahead and retain the mining and extraction where that is currently ongoing in the community. And finally, we've got public use areas. That includes your public and semi-public uses and parks and recreation. And once again, just your land use map. If there's any specific questions on any areas, we can refer back to this map.
On page 6, you had a highlighted spot where you didn't have a figure. That should be
Yeah, that's
1.5.
1.5, okay. And then a new component to this map to this plan that we'd like your feedback on whether you would like to retain this solar policy map. What we've done is actually map the different solar policies that are included in your comprehensive plan currently. We did not make any changes to that solar policy. We're merely indicating where existing solar facilities are located and then what areas, kind of all of these different constraints that you have in your current policy, where those locations would then be appropriate or what that looks like when you would map it.
So that map is showing everything within a mile of a city or hub, within a mile of the power line, and within a mile and a half of another solar project. So that's basically what she used to generate that map.
And that's on page 16 of your packet.
Kelly, I think that was page 3. Yeah, you have it. We have 6 facilities and we have 5.
It's 5, yeah.
Can you mark that, Aaron? Okay. Are there any questions on mapping before we move on to strategies? I've left some time for discussion at the end, so if there's anything else that you'd like to bring up, we can. So in terms of the strategies for this land use chapter, the first few, 1 through 3, deal with your zoning ordinance updates. Your first is a general review and update of your ordinance. We always suggest an annual review and update. There's new state code legislation that comes out. And then, of course, after a comprehensive plan, your next step in the cycle of planning is to revisit your zoning ordinance and verify whether there's any misalignments and try to correct that to make sure that you then are, through your regulations, achieving the level of development and the types of development that you have envisioned through your comprehensive plan. The next is to review your zoning ordinance to consider a wider mix of use types. This is also carrying over from what we discussed in the housing chapter at the last meeting, but just allowing a greater diversity of housing. You really already are doing all the right things when it comes to housing, and really we've shared some of the stories from Greensville County and other communities with the projects that you've had. So this is just making sure that if there's any tweaks to that zoning ordinance to expand and build upon those great achievements, that we would suggest that as well. And then as a new thing, number 3 is one that we don't even have a priority or responsibility on here, just because it's, well, I'm curious for feedback on if this is something that you would like to include in your comprehensive plan. State code allows for, through your zoning ordinance, a community to designate an entrance corridor overlay, which would lead up to your historic areas. So that would be for you all downtown Emporia. But as a gateway into Emporia, the county could designate an entrance corridor overlay for a set area, which might have a little bit higher level of design requirements or landscaping requirements. It's a way to have a slightly elevated aesthetic of your community as you enter historic areas. That's not something that you're interested in, we'll just remove it, but it is something that you through state code would be enabled to do as a corridor leading into Emporia. The next set of principles are kind of some general development principles. These are things like encouraging infill development, number 4, just discouraging any inappropriate or detrimental development that would impact your rural areas that the community so desires to protect, and then creating connected neighborhoods and creating that sense of connection in your community, including through transportation, sidewalk connections, trails, and paths. 7 and 8 are some more practical implementation tools. We'll suggest that you improve your online GIS tools by actually using this future land use map and posting that online so that it's more easily accessible to your community, so there's a level of transparency, which is something that we heard during that public outreach as well. And then increasing any city-county coordination. Regionalism is something that we're always thinking about in planning, and since you have such a interdependency between Emporia and Greensville County, it's important to keep and increase that sense of connection and communication. And then community character, there's a few things here, 9 through 11 would be encouraging flexible site design, such as cluster housing. You have to allow cluster housing through state code, but you can also incentivize it, so that might be something to consider. Number 10, that high quality architectural features, including landscaping, that can create that sense of community. There's things that you can do with landscaping and architecture. As I mentioned before, the entrance corridor can be a really great way to achieve that through regulation. And then encouraging plan development with common design themes. That's another way to achieve it. So if someone's coming in for a rezoning, you're having this idea of, we'd like some high quality development here in Greensville County. We'd like coordinated materials, similar to like what you've done on this campus with the brick and similar architectural design. And so with that, I'd like to first, are there any other questions on strategies in particular that of these that we've just discussed or that I've just mentioned? Okay. Hearing none. I'll then just open for a brief discussion on land use policies. One of the attachments that we provided, the last attachment in your, I think it's actually just a separate connect, yes, I see you've got it there. It's, we've got this guide to rural preservation. Yes,
If we could just back up real quick.
sure.
And maybe ask Lynn about, I was really curious about number 7 with the GIS tools. Lynn, does our GIS stuff get updated or upgraded periodically?
Yes, it is. In the past, it was getting updated once a year, and then we kept, and the reason for that was the Commissioner of Revenue would never update their new sales and everything but once a year. So they'd hold everything and then start, so you could be 18 months behind. We put enough pressure on them that we started getting them to do it every month. Now, Amanda, our GIS coordinator, has access to the clerk's office computer system, and she does it every week. So we went from about 18 months to 2 years, and we're doing it every week now. And she stays on it, because if I approve a plat and somebody doesn't record it, she calls them, hey, you know, you haven't recorded this plat yet, what are you gonna do? I mean, she is really on top of it, so it's as up to date as you can get.
So
You
I
know-
suspect the new land use maps and things will get updated pretty quick too then, you think?
Well, they're doing the land use maps.
Well,
Yeah.
we're saying that as a strategy here, number 7, that should then be available online.
Oh, yes, it'll be available, yes.
Good, because
Yes,
it was just
and-
listed
and-
here
and-
as a medium priority. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's why I was.
But that's something that's easily doable for Amanda.
Gotcha.
Well, I should say GIS, but, you know, I just thank God we don't have a third party doing it, because third party stuff, I mean, they're way behind. And I'll give you an example of how it hurts us at the county. You know, if y'all call in about a grass complaint, and this has happened numerous times, it used to be I'd go look it up. Well, I'll send a letter to Kim, and she said, well, I sold that 8 months ago. And that happened a lot. But now it's updated every week, and it's so nice. I mean, you can't believe how nice it is for staff.
Yeah, it's great having Amanda doing that full time.
Yes.
So I think what I'm hearing is let's change that to a high priority, that
Yeah,
it
that'd
can be done immediately after adoption.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Kelly, can you talk about more, about number 3? I don't have a mic, sorry,
Yeah.
but I talk loud. Like, give me an example, like maybe at our 58 entrances, you know, on Highway 58, our Brunswick lines, our Southampton line on 58 maybe, or our 301 line, you know, there's nothing there now. We do have signs that say, welcome to Greensville, and, you know, has our seal on it and all that. There's no landscaping, and I always cringe because like
The weeds.
lately, there's no, you know, they don't, the grass is not cut, you know, sometimes.
Well, what,
And it would be nice, you know, if there were some flowers, or if there was shrubbery, or if there was something, but, I mean, I know that, again, it's more work to do that, but we don't, is there anything else that we could do at these centers? Because there is nothing, you know, there, it's just, you know, it's just highway. I mean, you guys have probably noticed it coming in from Sussex on
Mhm.
301. And so, you know, what else can we do there? Other than doing some sort of like maybe little brick, knee wall type thing. So you're saying that we could actually designate that as a zone, so any business that in the future might pop up there, which we could get something here on 301, that they have to have lower signage, or they have to landscape, or they have to do what?
Yeah, I think that you said it exactly,
like
you
Williamsburg.
hit the nail on the head. You would, it would be through your zoning ordinance. It would only apply to new development. You could apply it to residential. You may only decide that you would want to apply it to business signage, and business landscaping, commercially zoned property within this set area. You need to look at it pretty closely. We could do that with Lynn, but on which roads would qualify. And then you would want to be specific on the distance. So you wouldn't do it, miles of area,
More like maybe,
closer into Emporia, exactly. And so these would be areas that, that you could look more closely at signage. You could have landscaping requirements along parking lot edges, but it would be a regulatory mechanism for it. You could go as far, I'm not aware of any issues through state code of looking at architecture, but you might decide, we don't want to go that far as regulating architecture. We just care about what's very close to the right of way. We'd like some trees in our parking lots, and we'd like lower signage in these areas. So that's, there's flexibility with it, but this is your regulatory mechanism. The other consideration was existing properties and landscaping. Really, the one tool that I have seen success with that is a landscaping grant program. And that can be a way a community-funded way to try to encourage property maintenance and property improvements. Similar to in a downtown where you might have a facade grant program, that could be done in a county along right-of-ways. Otherwise, it's really, I've seen other communities that have tree planting programs associated with their utilities or other things like that. But from a regulatory mechanism, that entrance corridor is a good one. Lynn, do you have any thoughts on that in particular? Would that be
Well, you
too much for
answered it
staff to
You answered it probably
administer?
more eloquently than I would have, but basically we had the same answer. And just so you know too, when you look at the interchanges, VDOT has programs, and we've taken advantage of that right here at this exit, where they planted all the crepe myrtle trees and some of the shrubs and different flowers and stuff. So that's something we could do at exit 4, too. That's a program through VDOT. And like I said, we've utilized it here, but that's another, I know that's different than what she's talking about, but that's something else we could do to improve the aesthetics when you're coming off 95 into the county.
And maybe that's a strategy, if the group would like to add that as a strategy, we could add that as well, probably in transportation chapter.
Yeah, because, again, that's coming in from, you're entering a new state, and that exit 4 really is the first, impression of Virginia, after you pass the West Ohio.
South Carolina has done it, and it's beautiful when you get to some of the exits in South
Oh,
Carolina.
yeah, well, that's why I'm used to seeing, like these, again, but the climate is different too, and it's easier to
Yeah.
maintain.
Yeah.
It's not as necessarily as easy to put stuff in, but, crepe myrtle trees tend to stand the
Does
test of time.
Does anyone have any heartache about adding that as a strategy, or can I get a nod of support for adding that?
Well, I think we should add it, and then if we ever want to pursue another VDOT grant, it's in the comp
Okay.
plan, so it'll be beneficial if it's in the comp plan and we do want to do it.
But
And-
we don't want no trees between the ramp going down to 95, because in some places they got
Well,
trees.
we removed the ones here when we did that, if you remember, yeah.
You need to see with the
Yeah.
traffic out there, the last 3 weekends, you couldn't get in Emporia on the weekend.
But that's part of what we did out here, we cut all the trees as part of that, that can be done through that program.
So, was that support for strategy 3 generally?
Yeah, it's support for strategy 3. I think that we should, have it. I'm not, again, I think we should include it.
Is that perhaps a low or long-term strategy versus a shorter or higher priority? If we do maintain that, I'd like some sense of how you'd like that prioritized among the other things.
To me, it just sets the tone, when you come into a county, and it looks nice, any little bit helps. It sets a tone, of, okay, this community cares about what it looks like. And so, for me, yeah, it would be medium, or, it would be high, because I think it's a small investment, but, it's how you present yourself. To me, it makes a difference.
Any comments from anyone else? Okay, we will take that feedback and incorporate it into the next draft, and then if you have comments then, we will certainly take it up at the next work session. All right, any final comments on the strategies for land use? Okay. So moving on, as I was saying, we have this guide to some different strategies for rural preservation. And we decided to go ahead and include this for you all to review and consider. I'm not advocating for any one of these particular strategies, but I think it's important for you to educate yourself on the different opportunities that are available through the state and through that we're enabled through state legislation to use. Some of these we've covered in other chapters. We've talked about the agricultural and forestal overlay districts. I believe that was in the environment chapter that we discussed last week. Some of these are more zoning related. So I want you all to be aware of these. We did not take a strong stance in advocating for any one of these particular strategies in your strategies chart. But if there are particular mechanisms that you see that you feel like would be very appropriate for Greensville County, I'd encourage you all to review these, and we could list them as strategies. Agricultural and forestal overlay districts, that's a pretty common one in Virginia. It offers long-term protection for land, usually at 10 to 20 years. The exact numbers are in here, but it does come with tax credits, tax benefits, which can impact the county's revenue. So there's real things to consider here as you review these and what would be appropriate. And really, in your land use chapter, how this comes into play is, would you want to designate, for instance, your agricultural and forestal overlay districts, that would be something that you would consider within your rural residential land use category. So you could we're not designating that whole area for these districts, but we're saying if someone were to come in and want to pursue this, that we would consider it and evaluate it on a case-by-case basis only in our rural residential land use category. So that's kind of an example of how your land use map can inform these different strategies. So again, please take some time to review this. Let us know if there's any of these that pique your interest or that you'd like to know more about, and we can bring it back at your next work session and explore where might be appropriate for some of those. So most of these are different, basically your rural preservation policies. The other big item that is important for us to discuss tonight is these density classifications. They're shown up on your screen. They're incorporated in the text, but most clearly they're shown on the screen in this little density table. So right now, the rural residential classification, Lynn was saying it's 1 dwelling unit per 1.25. 1.5 acres. That is pretty low that's pretty high density for a rural area.
I was getting ready to interject something here. I just heard last week that the health department's regs have changed as far as parking, which makes it harder for property to park. And right now, a minimum of 1.5 acres, it's hard to get a well, a septic, and a reserve drain field on the site. So that's something we might need to consider in the future, is increasing the lot size from an acre and a half. Because I've had a few plats recently where they've done soil work and they couldn't fit it all on an acre and a half. And I thought they were in good areas, and I need to look into this change. I just heard it through a soil scientist the other day. I hadn't contacted the health department to see what changed. I imagine it's a separation distance from the bottom of your drain field and the high water table. That's just what I'm guessing, but that's something that we might need to consider, because, most counties are 3 or 5 acres now.
So if you think about 1.5 acres, or 1 acre, 1 dwelling unit per 1.5 acres, that can be a pretty suburban feeling development. And so if we're saying across the whole county, that's okay, and we want to keep what we have with the soils and the health department changes aside, that's fine. But I just, want to make you aware that's fairly suburban to have across your whole rural residential area. The tools in here can help protect against that, so where you might still have a 1.5 acre lot size, but we're going to encourage cluster development, and we would prefer you to develop in a cluster development pattern, maybe by allowing slightly higher density but more open space preservation. And so that might be your preferred method of development. You can also implement either larger lot zoning or sliding scale zoning. These are other, and also described here, ways that you can help to preserve larger lots. Large lot zoning is often criticized because it's land consumptive. That might be requiring a minimum 20-acre lot size, which would be a big change. And when talking with Lynn, we didn't think that was going to be
I think they run us all out the room.
accepted in the community. Sliding scale zoning is another way that can help allow for smaller lot sizes, but also with preservation. So there's carrots and sticks here to consider. If you're happy with the development that you're seeing now, we don't need to, I didn't provide you a really detailed memo on this particular topic, because if you're happy with what you have, then we'll just keep it as it is. But I did want to bring this to your attention. Now's a good time to start having these discussions, because as you move into your zoning ordinance, that's when it becomes, regulatory. And if you're looking to update or change anything, we need to start having those discussions now.
Go ahead.
Well, the cluster development, again, in the county here, it hasn't been done, but I was interested to see that you said that it is required in your more heavily populated areas, which I did not realize.
It's required for counties under state code to allow cluster development. Mm-hmm. But state code also allows you to use density bonuses or not. So that's a may item. You may have density bonuses to encourage cluster development.
Lynn, when we have water and sewer going down the road, is it still an acre and a half?
No, we typically rezone it to, it depends. If you have one utility, it's R1A or R1B, which are larger lots. And then if you have both utilities, you can get down to what R1C, they're the smallest lots. But they're right small, the R1C lots.
I didn't know if we needed to, maintain a little bit of size to lots, even because we're starting to run water and sewer in a lot of places.
Well, that's typically what we've done whenever we've had a CDBG project or we've extended utilities, we follow it up with a zoning change. Because they're not relying on well and septic. My only concern about increasing the acreage is, number one, we live in a fiscally distressed community, and some people couldn't afford 5 acres, where they can afford an acre and a half. That's one of my main concerns over that. Plus, we don't see a whole lot of development like other communities do. So it's something, I don't think we'd have to do something right now. I think if we start seeing these health department regulations really requiring more land, then that's the point we maybe need to look at going to 2 acres or 3 acres or something at that point. I don't think we, and this is just my opinion, I don't think we need to rush to do it now.
It is this is the time to have that discussion. Like
Yeah.
I said, you're absolutely right. It can be a cost and affordability issue. You don't want to create barriers to housing also. So it's that delicate balance of what's most important in your community and what issues are you facing now. So if right now we're not in a high growth, high development time, and keeping that affordability of housing is the most important thing, then going ahead and setting that. We also don't have to include density in your comp plan, so that, can kind of skip the rock a little bit, but if you don't want to include it, you don't have to. We can talk more about the character of development if you prefer that as well, which is more, and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but the current comp plan doesn't talk about density for each land use category.
Right. But I like having the density in there when you get to medium density and high density, if you follow me.
Lynn, question. When I asked this question, if you have water and sewer, if you got an 80 by 60, I was told you could put a house on an 80 by 60 if there's water and sewer there. I just want to.
80 by,
60.
it has to be a minimum of 80 foot of road frontage, and I don't have in front of me 12,500 square feet.
That
So-
was gonna be my next question as far as, road frontage. It's gotta be 150 feet, right?
No, in the A1 district it does. 150 feet in the A1. R1A is 90 feet. R1B is, I take that back, R1A is 100 feet, R1B is 90 feet, and R1C is 80 foot of road frontage. So that depends on what district you're in.
And it have to be road frontage. It couldn't be like open area on a farm.
No, it has to be a state maintained road or public right of way.
Okay.
Because if not, you'll end up like Ruby Trail was, where you had 5 or 6 houses on a path that you had to drive through a creek to get to, and it just makes it tough for emergency services and stuff.
That's the main reason, emergency,
One
pretty
of the
much.
reasons, and then a lot of these developments, years ago when people would build 5 or 6 houses back in the woods, then they'd come to the county and expect the county to build them a road for their subdivision. So that's one of the reasons. It's numerous reasons.
Okay.
Great. Anyone have any thoughts to share either about this rural preservation guide or any of the standards and strategies that we have in here, or this density question?
I have a question.
Sure.
How many localities do you see with a water source protection overlay district now? Is that becoming more popular?
Aaron, do you?
I know that was one of our recommendations.
Yeah, I saw that.
I haven't seen it widespread, but I have seen it particularly in areas that are more limited to the actual water source that they do have.
Okay. I was just curious what other localities were doing.
I think that's something we probably need to look at, especially.
Well,
around
the Water and Sewer Authority is, when they had that last,
Nottaway River
Yeah.
with future development of issues. And
Yeah. Glenn and Gary have a lot on a water source protection plan where they did that study about 1.5 years ago.
we just invested a lot in that reservoir and our water
Yeah.
system. And, make sure we maintain that river.
What did we just decide? Because we talked about that during the environmental portion.
I don't
What did
think
we
I was at
decide
that
about
meeting.
that?
One of them I missed.
It may have been.
Yeah.
We
I
have it as a strategy, I
Yeah.
believe, but we haven't mapped a particular area for that to apply to. So we need any information that you would have on
And
that.
Gary and them have some of this information that a consultant did for them a year or so ago. So I'll get to digging into that.
But I think, like Tony said, I think we were really interested in that. I just can't remember how we left it.
Yeah, I'll get with Glenn and Gary.
Okay.
And, I mean, that's something that the Water and Sewer Authority will, have to push, but yeah. So So I'll get some more information on that and report to you. Or maybe get Glenn and them to do a presentation.
I want to back up just a second. This went by me, and I've been sitting here for the last 30 minutes. I'm sorry I wasn't listening well. I'm trying to figure out on the transportation, on page 5, how is it since, what's the explanation since 2005, our county roads have lost so much transportation, so many daily drops? It shows here the Dry Bed Road is down 33%. It shows that the Slagles Lake Road is down 8%, Brink Road down 17%. I would have thought it was the other way. There certainly appears to be more traffic than it has.
It might be several factors, and maybe she can answer it better. You don't have all the
I mean,
Aluga
you probably
traffic.
got these numbers from
VDOT.
somebody else. So.
The ADT camps from VDOT.
So does anybody else have an idea on how that's, all of them are, you look, 95 has jumped up from, up 12%. 58 is lost down to 6%, and it's hard to see that because when I'm on 58, it looks like it's more than ever.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I think each road
Are we
probably has
losing
a
that much
different.
population that nobody's driving, or what?
Yeah, well, I looked at it too, and I was looking at each section, they had a decrease, and my thing on the Brink Road is, the last traffic count said you probably had a Luca working, you know.
The traffic count was in 19.
Was that 19?
Well, in 19, it dropped,
Yeah.
the Brink Road down from 23 down to 1,900.
Well, we'll double check those figures.
I mean, I just curious.
Yeah, I was
would've
too,
thought it was
yeah.
going the other way. He's gonna tell me.
Well, I think just a comment on that. So VDOT does publish these numbers every year. That doesn't mean that they're counting the traffic on these roads every year. These are estimates.
Oh,
So,
so they just estimated all of them were going down, is that right?
so they do have a methodology, and I'm not totally proficient on exactly what their
Right.
methodology. They do measure the traffic on these roads from time to time.
Right.
They certainly just don't have the capacity to do that every year. So they publish that information, and it's possible that they could have changed their methodology. That's one possible explanation, and I certainly trust your judgment in saying that the roads are busier.
If you don't think the Brink Road ain't busy, get on it with a
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a prime example of that is Slagger Lake Road you mentioned. Otterdam was closed for a
Yeah.
year under construction. All that traffic was diverted to Slugger's Lake. So how could that number have gone down?
But I think that total might have been, the actual last count was probably,
Okay, well, I'm
10
just
years
curious.
ago.
I sat here and I saw it later on, and I stopped listening because I was trying to figure out how did this
I
happen?
question the same thing.
Well, I mean, that's good input. This is information that VDOT wants to see in the plan, so it certainly should be included, but we can adjust it and so that it's not maybe as misleading to say, oh, these are the percent changes and take that in kind of final. It's probably more informative to say, comparing roads one versus another, saying, all right, Dry Bread Road versus Brink Road, and sort of comparing the amount of traffic on one road versus another. I would not necessarily take 1 year versus another as to be as informative as just comparing road to road. So we could kind of adjust that information because you all certainly know more about the traffic on these roads that we do and probably that VDOT does, to be honest.
But it's hard to do not having accurate data.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if y'all look from 2015 to 2019, on all these secondary roads, they're almost all identical. Most of the change shows up from 2005 to 2010. You know, so I don't know what happened.
I don't know. I kept racking my brain for an explanation as to why people stopped driving. Because this would be local traffic for the most part,
Mostly, yeah.
Huh?
Mostly local, yes.
Yeah.
You know, GP closed, so I figured that might be the reason for 608 having less traffic.
Yeah.
GP and Jarrett, you know.
Right.
But, yeah, we can,
Well,
So-
whatever.
Yeah, I think we just need to kind of adjust the table so that it's not as like just here it is and this is what's changed, just to make it a little bit more subtle, kind of an informative, but not necessarily these are the changes that have occurred since 2005 because, again, these are just estimates that VDOT puts out annually. But yeah, thank you for that comment because.
Well, I just, curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I certainly wasn't driving on these roads in 2005, so I trust your judgment.
And some of it is seasonal.
Yeah.
Depending on what time they
Yeah.
put the strips out to check.
Yeah.
Because Brink Road, for example, with all the lake traffic in the summertime, is gonna be way higher than.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're.
Well, it's like the last rural
On a
road
Sunday
edition we
afternoon.
did. I made them put the traffic things out there during hunting season. You know, and we had 50 people a day.
Then- The
Okay.
kind of the next step of this process, along with public review, is VDOT review. And so we can have them look at those numbers specifically and see if there's any other growth estimates that they have for the roads around here. All right. Back to land use. Any other comments or concerns about land use?
All right, are there more questions? If not.
I'm not quite done yet. I've got a few more slides for you.
Carolyn must be cooking supper
Excuse me.
tonight.
She's at the end of the book.
You got one more slide?
Yep. One more section. We got section 3 to do, and forgive me as well. So the final chapter before you tonight. Yes, this is the third tab, which Treva so graciously added to help guide our discussion tonight. This chapter, and I'll move through it quickly, is that it basically provides some basic implementation steps. Some of this you all should be fairly familiar with, but in some ways it's education for your citizens as well. If they want to know, how the plan is used, this is a good chapter to direct them to. Talks about the annual budget, capital improvement plan, how you can modify your land use regulations and use the plan with your land use actions, as well as it also just mentions intergovernmental cooperation, and then, as I mentioned before, that annual review and update as being important. The key thing that I want to point out to you tonight is this slide, which is on a summary of page 3 of this attachment 3, which is the implementation matrix structure. We've been working through your implementation matrix along the way. And so, when we're talking through the priorities of those strategies, we've been doing that, which is leading us to the development of this matrix structure. We will also add, and assuming that you like this proposed structure, it's something that we've done in other communities, is to add implementation type, which these are listed here on page 3. Basically, how are you going to implement this particular strategy? It'll be updating a regulation. It'll be working with community outreach. It'll be establishing a partnership with VDOT, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll basically categorize those and give them as an Excel spreadsheet to Lynn so that he can, sort through them, track them. You guys can use that as a tool for your planning office. We'll also identify responsible parties. Sometimes, although most of the responsibility in your comp plan is on the county, sometimes there are other responsible parties that need to be identified. And then finally, we've talked through the priority and timeframes. We've kind of combined those two with your high, medium, low, and ongoing, roughly correlating to a time frame. But one of the things that we can also do is identify your catalyst or your highest priority projects. So as you review the full plan that comes back to you for this next review draft, I'd encourage you all to highlight any of those key priority projects. One of those we heard tonight, that source water protection. It sounds like it's been something that's come up throughout this plan. We might want to go ahead and mark that and just highlight these are our top 5 or our top 10 projects that we're going to be pursuing. So we don't do that in every plan, but it is something that I like to offer. Kind of gives your citizens, this is what we're working on next. So this is the immediate action, that catalyst action from your plan. Is that something that you all would like to basically assign as homework for yourselves over the next, after our next draft, and talk about, we can bring that for discussion at the next work session if you would like. And we can also frame that through the public outreach for the public review process and do it that way.
That sounds good.
Okay. So that's all that I have in terms of that implementation matrix. Were there any questions on the implementation chapter or your implementation matrix?
I like how you put the time frame with the priorities, because I really wasn't sure what high or medium or low actually meant. So that's good.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay. So we have now made our way through all of the chapters of your plan so far. We still are working through some comments that we received. Particularly, we owe you all some additional one-sheeters for each of those chapters, and we're working on that. We're going to be incorporating all of your comments and compiling the full draft plan that will go through staff review, VDOT review, and public review. We target an open house to occur with that draft plan in October. That's an opportunity for you to tell your constituents to come here, view the plan. We'll have some exhibits. We'll give a brief introductory presentation to the plan and its major components, and then have an opportunity for your citizens to talk with us in a more informal setting about how we develop this plan, what are some of the strategies. We can talk through the land use plan, and so just a more informal question and answer session than what ultimately moves to adoption with your public hearing process. After that public open house, we then come back for a final work session with you all to talk through any changes. We'll talk through those priority projects and any changes or comments that you all have and that may have arisen through the public review process. So that's our chance to make sure we all are coming back on the same page with that final draft that's going to go through the public adoption process. Then we'll move on to public hearings. We'll target for the January, February timeframe. State code allows those to either be a joint public hearing or you can hold your separate public hearings. We would like to know which one of those options that you would like to proceed with. So far, you all have done a great job in a joint setting, but the 2 public hearings does allow the citizens to come twice to hear. So that's something for you all to decide, and I'm sure Lynn will have some ideas on that as well. We don't have to decide that now, but we will want to decide that as we move into the open house and kind of be able to know what we would want to share with the citizens in terms of next steps. And so with that, I now stand ready to answer any final questions or yield the floor.
So now that we've gotten through all the chapters, once you guys finish, any feedback that we've gotten, will we be able to review everything and have another meeting maybe in September?
So typically, and what our scope of work is that would be a concurrent review. So we don't have another review before it would go to the open house. Yeah, so your review would be concurrent. Now, if there are major issues or any tweaks that we need to do, we'll just collect all that feedback concurrently before it goes to public review.
Because it's just been so long. This is taking us
COVID, yeah.
So long that it's like, okay, from that chapter 1,
Well,
I'm not really remembering.
yeah, well, Kelly will get the revised copies to me, and I'll make sure y'all get them in plenty of time.
I just like to review it.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would certainly encourage that as well. Yeah.
Lynn, what kind of attendance do you expect at an open house?
Oh, last time we did it, I mean, we had some people, but not a lot. I mean, we're gonna put it in the paper, we're gonna put it on the website, we're gonna get the word out as much as we can, but I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I was just curious.
I would hope we would have a lot,
Yeah, the more the better.
yes.
And again, I'll do a final call for photos. Thank you for the few photos that we've received so far. We would really like to include some photos of, people together. If there's any community activities or photos from events that you all have that you'd like to see incorporated into the comp plan, please send those along to us. It always helps to show and demonstrate the community through the plan. So we'd love to include some photos if you would like to send those to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one other question, curious question. In the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I've had an occasion to have to go to Richmond a lot. Coming back just beyond exit 13, the highway department has a solar-powered sign sitting there that said North Carolina, 18.5 miles. It appears to me that that's suggesting, don't y'all stop here, drive on for 18 miles, you'll be in Carolina. Why would they go there and put that there? Does anybody know?
When you go north, it says Petersburg and Richmond.
Well, I'm not worried
Same
about them
thing.
up there.
I
I'm kind
know.
of concerned with them running on down to Carolina
I
here.
know.
You know, I just wonder why they're putting that there.
I don't know.
Because I see 44,000 people normally travel 95 a day, according to this.
I think it changes as needed, if they have backups or something, it changes so you can find an alternative route, because I've
Maybe
noticed.
so.
Because I've noticed one time when I went to Richmond, traffic was really backed up, and
Yeah.
it was a long time getting to Richmond.
Right.
On that sign, going north. So I
Okay.
think that's just trying to help
Yeah.
people on the highway, determine
Yeah.
how bad the traffic flow is. But I see what you're saying.
My thought was, it wasn't
Hurry up.
traffic, it just
Yeah.
said telling people, well, 18 more miles, you can be in North Carolina.
Yeah.
So don't stop anywhere in the next 15 miles.
We're gonna put them entrance signs coming into the county, and
Yeah.
we're gonna put all the beautiful aesthetics, and
That's
gonna
right.
clear up that problem.
It's gonna clear that problem out.
Hey, Walter, unplug
Yes,
that
sir?
thing the next time you come by.
Huh?
Unplug that sign the next time you
Unplug
come by. Yeah, stop and unplug it.
That's
Just throw a
probably,
blanket
that's
over
probably
it.
a class 1 misdemeanor. I don't think I want to come in there and do that. All right. Anything,
He wants you to go to jail.
thank you. Anything else to come up for the planning commission? Can I have a motion?
Before we adjourn, Treva has the agenda packets for next
Okay.
Tuesday's planning commission meeting, so we don't have to worry about
Getting it.
the mail getting to you,
Thank you. Thank you.
or the deputies. We started letting the deputies deliver it.
All right. If nothing else, while she's handing them out, then we can have a motion to adjourn. I've got a motion to adjourn to second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We have adjourned the planning
Can I
commission.
get a motion that we adjourn the work, session?
Second.
And move in second, all in favor, say aye.
Thank y'all for
Ayes,
coming.
carried.
Yeah, that's-